10x your service design offering with Smapply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smapply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smapply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of This Is HCD. My name is Gerry Scullion, and today we're going to be talking about leadership, introversion, and the invisible emotional toll of workplace dynamics. I'm going to be speaking to the wonderful Australian-based thought leader Tim Yeo, who's the author of The Quiet Achiever, and a design leader who's made a mission to help quieter people thrive at work. Now, something a little bit more personal on my take in this, over the last number of years, I really have learned that a lot of the tension that was in my life came to the fact that I too am an introvert. Many people who got to work with me kind of like look at me funny because I do mask an awful lot of my introversions. We discussed this in great detail with Tim. Tim's a really remarkable leader in this space. Now, if you've ever felt drained after a day of meetings, struggled to be heard in noisy environments, or wondered whether leadership is only for loud and bold, this really is a great episode for you. There's three key takeaways in this episode that I want to focus on. And we really did focus on this quite a lot. Introversion is not shyness. It's about how we manage our energy. And Tim shares how understanding this has reshaped how he works and also how we can work and lead teams in organizations. The second of the three key takeaways I want to talk about is the leadership doesn't have to have one voice. Now, this is something I saw many times over the decades that I was working as a full-time employee. There seems to be a very macho kind of male-dominated conversation or behavioral type that persists in organization. And myself and Tim really challenge this myth of the extroverted ideal and offers a more inclusive vision of what great leadership looks like. You talk about tactical tools for introverts. So if you are somebody who identifies as an introvert, we want to make sure that what you get out of this episode is actionable. So please stay listening. I think you'll find there's lots of great tools and tips in there from Tim in that book. Again, The Quiet Achiever. I encourage you to get it. For preparing for meetings, to reclaiming time for recovery, Tim shared practical ways to thrive without burning out. Now, folks, if you are listening to this podcast and you've listened to it more than once or twice, we really would appreciate it if you liked and subscribe to the podcast. It helps those magic algorithms really place some more emphasis and shine a light on the great work that we do here at This Is HCD. Again, this conversation really with Tim is really about honouring how we and human beings are wired and designing work and workplaces that actually support human diversity. It really underpins a lot of the work that I've been focusing on the last couple of years. And again, big shout out to Megan Dell, before I forget, who introduced or reintroduced myself and Tim. We met many, many years ago whilst I lived in Australia. So I know it's going to be a great episode. I know you're going to love it. But before we jump into that, just a quick shout out. If you're looking to create a more inclusive and human-centered environment in your organization, sign up for my free 5-day email course on kickstarting a human-centered service design approach. The link's in the description below. If you go to thisishcd.com, you will no doubt stumble across a promotional link. Try and get into it. I think you'll find it very valuable. Let's get into the episode of Tim. Hope you enjoy it. Tim, delighted to have you on the podcast. For our listeners, maybe start off, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from and what you do.
So my name is Tim Yeo, and last year some of you might have seen that I wrote a book called The Quiet Achiever. I'm a designer and a design leader, and I've been doing that for I think the last 20 years or so. Half of that time was probably spent in consulting, and the other half was working in-house. And when I say working in-house, most of that time was probably working for startups in Australia that you probably never heard about. But
no, I don't know about that.
Except for Gerry, I think he at least knows one of the places that I worked at. But the common thing as a designer and a design leader working in those environments throughout those 20 years, there was one common thread, which is I always found myself working in environments, being in meeting rooms with people with strong opinions and loud voices. Yeah. And as my own personal journey, I didn't really even know or come across or fully understand the word introvert until the year 2012 when I first saw Susan Cain's TED Talk called The Power of Introverts. And it was really the first time that I understood or had the language to describe who I was and how being me felt like. Before that, I just thought I was shy. I always thought I could do more to be like other people at work who seem to be doing things so much easier. They could do public speaking and at the drop of a hat. All these role models of leadership, whether it's in design or in business, it always seemed to fit this kind of a extrovert ideal, the picture of an extrovert ideal. And the truth is, for a long time, I always felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like there was something wrong with me. So for a long time, I pretended. It's a very common story when you speak of introverts. They pretend. And for a while, for me, it worked. But I was exhausted because I was always trying to pretend. It felt like I was wearing a mask. But then one day, the mask just got so heavy that I just couldn't put it on anymore. So I had to find my own way. During the course of that time, I was at the stage in my career where I felt I could give back. And I put everything into a talk, which ended up being Design Leadership for Introverts. And it contained many of the pieces of what finally ended up into the book, The Quiet Achiever. And that's, in a nutshell, a short introduction of who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really impressive introduction. So let's talk about what we mean by introverted. So you mentioned there that it was in 2012 you heard that TED Talk. What does it mean to be an introvert?
Well, first of all, the first thing I'll say is introversion is not the same as being shy. Being shy is a fear of social judgment. So an extrovert can also be shy. Really, introversion and extroversion is how we actually respond to stimulation. So stimulation could be working in noisy environments or open plan office. So if you spend a day, for an introvert like myself, if you spend a whole day in meetings where you're talking or interacting with people, then at the end of the day, you're going to be losing energy. Whereas if you talk about an extrovert in that kind of environment, those interactions actually give them energy. And chances are by the end of the day, they might have even more energy than they started with and want to go do more social interactions.
Yeah.
So it's really about what kind of activities give you or take away energy. And in particular for quiet people like you and I, Gerry, I learned earlier you shared that you're an introvert yourself as well. But have you found yourself after long days of meetings or if you're leading workshop activities, how's your energy level by the end of those sessions?
So maybe a couple of years ago, I would have been absolutely exhausted, but I've put things in place that I try and prevent that. It used to be the case at the end of the day that I have nothing left in the tank. And I mean nothing. And I probably wasn't very enjoyable to be around when you've got two young kids as well. So I had to make that change. I didn't want to be that kind of irritable, not being able to be present, scrolling, doom scrolling, just trying to get out of my mind. And I had to take those measures. But yeah, to answer your question, exhausted, like not at the point of like, oh, I'm tired, I need to go to bed. But proper exhaustion.
And it's got nothing to do with, so it's really everything to do about how we manage our energy. It's nothing to do with our ability to perform certain roles at work, whether it is to lead teams, whether it's to do certain kinds of work. It's really about energy levels. And I find, as I talk to many introverts over the years, people have their own techniques. They have their own ways of actually managing their energy levels. I think the problem is that they don't talk about it. A lot of times people don't even publicly identify themselves as whether they're introverts or extroverts, because a lot of times people see introversion as a flaw. Sometimes people see introversion as a problem to be fixed.
Yeah.
And my hope is with the book and with more people stepping out and standing up and really just saying, yeah, I'm a leader. I'm a leader in business. I have a reputation. And I'm also quiet and introverted in nature. And that doesn't mean that I can't do all the things that I've been able to do. And I think the more of us actually stand up and stand out this way, then the future people who are entering the workforce have better role models to look up to. Because even today, if you look around, well, at least when I look around and we look for role models for us to mirror, a lot of them still end up being extroverted in nature.
Yeah, that is very, very true. There's a lot to unpack in that, Tim, because I'm playing the devil's advocate here in terms of a lot of people step up and say, actually, you know what, I identify I'm an introvert, and they mention it in work. What's the change that we're hoping an organization to provide when that happens? So what does it look like from an organizational perspective or leadership perspective to encourage this to happen? And there's lots of things that could probably and should change as a result of this. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is really understanding that, or accepting that there is more than one picture of what good looks like, of what good leadership looks like. Because a lot of times, even today, when you ask the people what a leader actually looks like, the picture in my head is a picture of, have you seen the movie Braveheart with Mel Gibson, where he's got his...
shot in my neighborhood in Ireland.
There you go. He's got war paint on his face. He's riding his horse. He's rallying his army before they charge into battle.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be too surprised if you speak to people and they have that same picture of what a leader looks like in their heads. If I want to be a leader, that's the kind of person I have to be. So I think if people can accept that there's more than one picture of what a leader looks like, and that's already a huge shift already on its own. Number two is to realize that all of us are different. As much as we like to hire homogeneous teams because they are like us, we feel like we fit together. The reality is that if you look around the world, everyone from every country is different. They have their own culture, their own way of behaving. Mm-hmm. If we can accept that all of us are different, then we can actually spend a lot more time and energy into creating ways of working together so that we can get the best out of each other. It's not about hiring same people. I find that when you're hiring same people, you get same ideas.
Yeah.
And I remember whether it was in school or before, it's all about trying to fit in. But then I found in my experience in the working world, fitting in doesn't get you ahead. Oftentimes it is being different from your competitors. It is having an advantage. And that can translate to people as well. If you want to stand out, if you have different ideas, if you have teams that are made out of different kinds of people with different kinds of experiences, then I think diverse teams do stand to have a much better chance of actually creating some kind of advantage for the team they work in, the company they work in. And then the trick here is, if you have same people, they will probably work in the same way. But if you have different kinds of people working together, then naturally there'll be more points of friction. Quiet people learning to work with louder people. People who tend to talk to think, whereas some people tend to think before they talk. How do you find ways to be able to get all these different kinds of people to be able to work together well and not to talk over each other all the time, but really investing and thinking about how you can actually work better together when you do have a diverse team so that the best ideas can win. Not just the loudest idea, but the best ideas from your team can win. I think that's the second key thing. So the first thing, accepting that there's more than one picture of what a leader looks like, and really focusing on how people who are different can actually work better together as a team so that the best ideas can win.
Would it be fair to say that the most likely scenario there is introverted people working with loud people? Is that something that you see more and more of the people that are coming into your community? People are struggling with working within loud environments now that most offices that I walk through are open plan. It's harder to find that little cave that I often this is like a cave where I am, folks. This is like my converted attic. Close the door, all I hear is the birds. It sounds idyllic. I kind of love it though. It's my space. I get to control it. You lose all that when you have to go back into the workforce, into the workplace, and you're in those open plan offices. Is that something that you're seeing being one of the main pain points for people who are introverted working in those working environments? What can they do about it if they're in that space, other than bringing noise cancelling headphones in?
So a lot of the people that I end up working with, whether they're designers, product managers, or engineers, they end up being tech, which is the industry that I've worked in. And whether you're writing code or whether you're pushing pixels, it tends to be a very solitary activity. Yeah. And it just seems to have a lot of people who are quieter in nature, people like myself, right? Because if your job is to be quiet, writing code, pushing pixels for long hours in the day, and you tend to be more extroverted in nature, then maybe this might not be a job you enjoy doing for very long, or you might be doing it in a much more extroverted way. So naturally, working in tech, a lot of people end up being quieter. The strange thing is, as you start looking upwards in your organization, and you start looking at the managers, and you start looking at the leaders, they tend to be louder in personality type, or maybe in the way that they present themselves. Yeah. And at first, in the beginning, again, is it because there's a picture of what the leader looks like? That's how they got into those positions? Is it how people think leaders should look like, so they get hired in? Yeah. Or maybe it is just, or maybe it's something else. I have a controversial theory, and I'll share it.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, it's also based on my own experience, but the reality is that as the higher up you get promoted, there are fewer people who have simply walked those paths. There are just simply fewer, right? People start on entry-level roles, they get promoted, they get higher up. But as you get into roles higher up in those organizations, the number of people who have actually walked those paths and know how to do those jobs are just fewer, right? There are fewer yardsticks to measure what's good or bad for a person that's in those roles. So then, what happens then? If there are fewer people, what I've seen from my own observations is a lot of the leaders that end up in those roles actually get there through the sheer force of their personality. You can see the effect of this in the way that they operate at work, the way that they behave. And it tends to suit a certain kind of person who is very happy to be loud, is very happy to share their opinions. It's not strictly an introverted or extroverted thing, but perhaps they also prefer to think as they talk. So if you start looking upwards, you start seeing that there's a certain model of what I've also seen of what leaders look like in organizations, and it tends to be the extroverted picture. Yeah. Which is weird, because it's either they are extrovert themselves, or perhaps they've chosen to adopt extroverted behaviors that present themselves to have that executive presence as they go.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's the mask. We're seeing the mask in leadership, and I know, like, the reason why I was smiling when you were talking there was because I was having sort of like flashes before my eyes of all these leaders that I'd experienced, especially in Australia, because it just seemed to be a very machismo, or sort of male-dominated, loud, extroverted, sports, chest-thumping atmospheres in lots of organizations. Mainly the banks, actually, when I think about it. So it's really interesting when you hear that. Like, and I can imagine how difficult it must be to be around that. Now, one of the things that I said to you before, which I actually haven't disclosed when I was chatting to you before, was not many people know that I'm an introvert. When I train, I was explaining to you there before, like when I fly around, and it was only recently that Mark, who I do a lot of training with, had said to me, he's like, I overheard him saying to one of my other friends when we were in London, saying, it's really surprising, like, how quiet Gerry is when he's at home. Like, he's very kind of like in his room, just kind of, or in the corner, just reading or any of that kind of stuff. And that's me trying to rebuild my energies. I'm lucky in that sense. When I go away to work, I have, really cool people that are around me. But what are the things that people can do who are introverted, who are in the workplace at the moment, and they're looking to find those little bite-sized moments to recharge their energies? Is that something that you've personally experienced when you're in those environments? Well, what are the tactical things that you could maybe suggest for people to reclaim some of those moments of clarity?
Some of the things when I'm coaching and working with introverts, they struggle with things like public speaking. They struggle with being able to talk in front of a large audience. Large is relative. It could be a small group. It could be 4 people. It could be 200, 1,000 people. It's relative.
Yeah.
But one of the things that people can do to reclaim their energy in some ways is to actually practice beforehand. How many times have we actually, when we're preparing for an important high stakes meeting, how many times have we actually practiced out loud rather than practicing in our heads? I think a lot of times when you talk to people and they say, yeah, I've rehearsed it, I practiced. And really, their rehearsal is really just in their heads. How many times have they actually used muscle memory to actually say the words, leaving their mouths and just saying it for real before they actually go on stage, before they are actually in the spotlight? I find that when you actually do those things beforehand, even if it's the start of what you're about to say, even if it's the first 1 or 2 minutes,
that's right.
It actually lowers your anxiety and it gives you a lot more energy in the moment that you're doing, let's say, public speaking. Because it gives you back energy because now you don't have to worry or be anxious about forgetting your lines because you have practiced them beforehand to the point where it's muscle memory. You can just say it. Earlier on, when we started this podcast interview, you asked me, hey, Tim, why don't you introduce yourself? We introduce ourselves all the time, but how many of us actually prepare introductions beforehand? We know that when we meet new people, it's always something that's going to happen. You're going to have to introduce yourself.
Small talk.
How many introverts listening to this podcast will have that feeling where they are working on their first day in a company, for example, and they're meeting their team for the first time? And they know it's going to happen. They know it's going to happen. But how many people actually practice, hi, my name is Tim, and they're introducing themselves and what they do? Most of the time, they feel a cold bead of sweat coming down the side of their face as everyone in the room is just staring at them and they feel like a deer in headlights. So the first thing you can do to reclaim your energy in those moments really is to practice beforehand, really practice for real. Yeah. If you know that you're going to have a big day with a couple of important meetings, make sure that you book time to regain your energy. Literally book blocks of time within your calendar so that nobody else can actually book over them. How you choose to use that time is really up to you. However else you can refill your well of energy. It might be going out for a walk. It might be taking a moment to do a quiet activity like replying to emails. Whatever it is, that's a quiet activity that will regenerate your energy. Consciously plan and book those times into your meetings. And don't give that up. I think that's the thing. A lot of times, especially in fast-paced environments, if you see white space in calendars, people are in a hurry to fill them because they are eager to appear busy, to feel like they are working. But at the same time, you have to recognize that in order for you to show up as your best version of yourself, these moments between meetings or between high energy activities, they are important and you have to protect them. And you have to do that in order for you to be able to go on and do the next thing well, because you need to recover the energy.
I love that, Tim. I love that. Can I just say, when you play back that scenario of starting in a new business and having to introduce yourself, I don't know if I've dreamt this or if it actually happened, but somebody printed out, I think, in one of the places I've been in when they started, and handed out an overview of what they did. I think it was in a bank, just so you know, this is who I am, and kind of like, made a joke out of it, and we all just read the thing, cool, whatever, and got on with our day. They completely diffused the situation. I don't know if it's a good tactic, but one of the things that I really don't miss is the small talk that with people. the bit when you work for yourself, I get to choose who I'm having my calls with. And, the clients that I get to work with, obviously, I don't get to choose them nearly all the time, but I'm very, very lucky. All my clients that I have are really super cool. But generally speaking, I get to control what's coming into my ears and, what's on my screen here. I don't have that, or I didn't have that when I was working in organizations. That bit where you're walking to the toilet and you see somebody coming towards you and you're like, oh, man, this person's going to want to talk and I'm going to have to fill that. What do you advise in those situations? I'd love to get your thoughts on what's that like for others.
Nobody really teaches you soft skills. I mean, when you look at education in general, everyone focuses on the hard skills. The hard skills have so much structure, right? Frameworks, things that you can follow. In some ways, when people talk about soft skills, they talk about hard skills and soft skills. In some ways, I think of them as hard skills and harder skills.
I was going to say,
in some ways, soft skills are not easy. They're not soft at all. They are hard. They are harder than hard skills. Because when you ask people, how do you speak up in meetings when you're a quiet person? They just say, just speak up more. How do you get to know more people? Just go and network. It's easy. I'll show you. I'm an extrovert. Just come along with me. I'll show you how to do it. So I think a lot of the work that I do these days is really about making soft skills hard, giving a lot more structure, a lot more frameworks, a lot of things that you can practice. And one of those things that you can practice is how to actually make small talk. For context, I was born and I came from Singapore, and it's in Asia. And you might be surprised to know that we don't really make small talk in Singapore. We start work, we meet someone new, we just get to it. We just talk about work.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Australia, like you said, you could be in a queue, waiting for a bus, a tram, a train. Small talk just creeps out on you. And I had to learn how to make small talk. And one of the ways that I made sense of how to make small talk was we have a framework, I'm sure you're familiar with it, called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So within Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have different kinds of needs. Starting at the lowest level, you have physiological needs. And then you have things like food and shelter. And then you have love and belonging. And then I forget what the fourth level is, but then the top level is self-actualization.
Yeah.
When you're making small talk, you can use Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a framework to come up with small talk topics. Focus on the lower levels, because the people you're talking to are most likely going to be humans. And people who are at the lower levels, you have the maximum amount of chance to build a connection with people, to have something that you can talk about. You don't really need too many topics. You just need 2 to 3 that you enjoy, that you like, that are really genuine to you, really authentic to you. So for example, you can talk about, I'm sure you would know this, but in the UK, people talk about the weather. They talk about the weather all the time. If it's a good weather day, they talk about how sunny it is. If it's a bad weather day, it's raining for 2 weeks nonstop, you can talk about the weather and complain how bad it is. If you enjoy food like I do, you can talk about the food that you're going to have for lunch, what you're going to prepare for dinner tonight, or maybe the barbecue in Australia that you're going to be having over the long weekend. Maybe you might be talking about sports. Maybe you might be talking about your kids. All these things, the lower level in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the more likely you are going to find a connection with the other person that you're going to talk to. And that's really all you need. Really, small talk. Small talk is the thing that happens before real talk happens. And in some cultures, it's kind of like sticking your hand out and the other person not shaking it back. It just feels awkward. So if you don't have the ability, if you don't make small talk with some people in some cultures, then it's as if you're starting a conversation and it's awkward already. And by the time the real talk happens, hopefully it's going to be, maybe it's going to be more awkward because of it. So in some ways, I had to learn how to make small talk, and I had to use these frameworks to give me the structure that I needed, because it was something that I wasn't familiar with. It wasn't something that was used to as part of my culture.
One of the things that was, I remember years ago, when you have a mask on, like I have done for most of my life, I felt that if you played the role, that suddenly everyone had access to that role. And what I mean by that is, if you're the jokey kind of person with a bunch of people, and then someone from outside of that circle comes to the conversation and they expect you to be the same, like, oh, like, make me laugh. And it doesn't work that way in my mind. So sometimes I'd say something and I'd be like, okay, I don't really know who you are. Like, so you can come across as being rude in that sense. And it's not intended at all. Like, because in my mind, most of the people in this world, I believe, are kind and genuine, and they don't want to offend. How can introverted people prevent that from happening? Like, if the small talk isn't on the table, so to speak, if it's not an option for them at that moment in time, and you're in the workspace and someone comes up, like, what you really want to probably say at that moment is, listen, look, I'm just not in the mood to talk. I just keep on doing it. And socially, you're penalized for that. You're like, hey, they're rude. I don't like them. And then suddenly you're in the bad bucket. You're in the sin bin. What advice do you have to people in that? Like, it's almost like I remember years and years ago, sorry, I know I deviate, but I love to deviate. I worked with this phenomenal, super smart person. I did business with him called Luke Shore. He's in Australia. And we used to call ourselves the knowledge workers. Okay, we were knowledge workers. And he used to say, he's going to design a flag that goes up on the computer. If I'm open to being engaged with today, that is you're allowed to come over. And then if you're not, that flag goes down. And we used to laugh about it, and then we would stop laughing, and we'd be like, wow, that'd be amazing, wouldn't it? How do you replicate something like that? Or is that something that we should probably think about more, about implementing into the organizations to prevent people from being penalized who are introverted when they don't want to have small talk?
Well, I don't have a good answer for not being able to make small talk on the spot. But I do have a good answer about a different scenario, if you wish to hear it. It's about being put on the spot in meetings when all of a sudden somebody say, Gerry, what do you think? And maybe you're quieter in nature and you need a bit more time to actually process before you come out with something to say, something meaningful to say. So I have two things here that you could do. One that you are in control of, and another that's probably in the control of the speaker that's asking you that question. A lot of times, like people like myself, we need a bit more time to actually process our thinking because we think before we talk. The problem is we think too long and the whole meeting will go by. And it's usually after the meeting that the idea is fully formed. And then you share it after in an email that nobody reads. Yeah. So if you find yourself in that position, one thing that you can do quite simply is to give yourself permission and license to speak up. It might sound something like this, right? So look, everyone, I have an idea in my head. It's not fully formed yet, but this is what I have so far. Look, this idea might sound silly right now. I haven't really thought about it for a long time, but let me share it with you to see what you think, and maybe you can make it better. Now, what those preambles, those things that I said before I said the thing, it gives you that permission, that license to make it okay for you to speak up, even before you're ready. You've made it okay because you've already just told everyone else that it's not fully formed. Don't judge me. But it also gives others the benefit of hearing what's inside your head. You know, you have to remember that you were invited to the meeting for a reason. And up until now, people still can't read other people's minds. So if you don't speak up, then no one will really know what you're thinking, even if what you're thinking is not fully formed yet. So you have to speak up and find ways like this to speak up so that you can be a player on your team. So that's within your control. Something that's within the control of the person in the meeting asking a quiet person could be to simply give them a heads up. You could say, Gerry, I'm going to come to you and ask you, what do you think about question B, for example? We're going to ask you this question B. But before we come to you, I'm just going to go to Jane first. And then we'll ask Jane, and then right after Jane, we'll come back to you next to see what you think. But if you got anything, maybe you can talk about it now.
Yeah.
So you kind of given people the heads up that there's a question coming up.
Yeah.
You've given them an easy exit to make it okay to actually take a little bit more time to think. But also know that they don't lose their space. They don't lose their opportunity to talk just because they need a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Now, as I'm talking, there was a third thing that came to my mind.
Let's hear it.
Many of the meetings that we do these days might be online. But how many virtual meetings have we been in where the primary mode of communication is still video and audio, somebody speaking?
Yeah.
Over here on the right, you have a chat window. Why not start making acceptable and accepting chat as a first-class citizen way of communicating, just like speaking up verbally? Why not use chat and accept that as a first-class way of speaking as well? Because you don't have to interrupt people. When we are talking online like this, it is impossible. The technology makes it impossible to actually speak over somebody else. Everyone who wants to speak, there's only one person that can speak at a time. But then you can have threaded conversations that happen in the chat window so that people can see what other people have to say without interrupting them mid-sentence.
Yeah.
So I think earlier on in the interview, we were talking about how to work better together, finding ways to work better together when we're all different. I think in the last couple of questions that you asked, what I hope is I've shown a few ways about what I mean when I say ways of working together. And they don't take a whole lot of energy. They don't take a whole lot of change. They're just small things done well. And the effects actually compound over time. If you can do these small things in your day-to-day, they are things that you can do as soon as tomorrow. And they are going to have an impact, not just on you, but also on the team that you work with. Yeah.
It's going to sound really weird, but it's really soothing listening to you speak, Tim. You've got a lovely cadence and delivery. I want to talk to you about, it's a two-directional question I'm going to ask. One is the role of a facilitator. If you don't really align to what we're talking about here, maybe you're a facilitator, but you want to take a greater care in including introverted people into your conversations and into your workshops. And then the second part of that conversation I'd like to have is around being introverted and running a workshop. That latter question is something that I do. I put the mask on, I wear the skin, I wear the clothes, and I assume it, and then I fall down in a heap at the end of the day. I'm like, oh, I'm tired. First part of the conversation. How can people be more inclusive to the different conversation styles? And you kind of touched on it there a little bit around first-class communication styles using chat. I'd love to hear a little bit more around that and what you advise for the facilitator community out there and what they can take from this.
If you want to be more inclusive and you want to be more inclusive tomorrow or even for the next workshop you're about to run the next day, you can be a lot more inclusive by just sending out the agenda beforehand. Don't just send, okay, tomorrow we're going to run a workshop. See you guys there. Bye. How many meetings, how many workshops do we actually show up where that is all you know beforehand? Now, that really caters to people who can think on the spot, people who are able to come up with ideas on the spot. But how good will those ideas actually be? How much greater can those ideas be if people had time to prepare? I don't think it is strictly an introvert or extroverted thing, where maybe introverted people need more time to prepare. But I think in general, you would agree that the more time you have to prepare, chances are the ideas will be better rather than just coming up with the first idea that comes to your mind. Send 100%. Them out beforehand. Ask people to prepare their ideas, maybe even write it down so that when they do come, you don't have to come up with ideas on the spot. You have stuff ready to go. You have pros and cons analysis ready in your head or written down on a notebook, ready to discuss and debate. And this is a much more effective way of actually running sessions where you want to actually talk to people and discuss ideas to create better ideas. You don't want to use that live synchronous time to be thinking about those ideas. You do that beforehand. You bring those ideas with you. And once you bring them with you, you can debate, have interesting conversations about how you can make those ideas better. So the first thing right out the bat, definitely write those ideas down, get people to bring them to those sessions. And the way you do that is to actually send out the agenda. What's the outcome that you're trying to look for from those sessions that you're facilitating?
Love it.
To your second question about quieter people who want to be facilitators, how can they manage?
Yeah.
I love facilitation because to facilitate well, you have to listen well. People think that facilitators are speaking all the time. They have to have all the answers. If that is what you think, then you're probably facilitating wrong. Your job as a facilitator is to get people from point A to point B and to get them out of the session on time and on agenda. To me, that's a definition of what good facilitation looks like.
Yeah.
The ideas, the conversations, that's your attendees, the people you choose to invite, the people that you ask to come. They have the ideas in their heads. I see your job or the facilitator's job as to be the driver of the bus. And your job is to make sure you get there on time and on agenda. That's your job. And in order to do that, you have to be able to timekeep. You have to be able to recognize when some people are hogging the microphone a little bit too long. Your job is to realize there's this quiet person over there who seems to have something he wants to say, but is struggling to get the attention of others. Your job in those moments is to read the room, to observe, to listen to the conversation, to pass the microphone along, to stop people when they're hogging the microphone for too long, to pass it on to other people who haven't had the chance to speak yet. And if you do a combination of all these things, then the best ideas can win. The best ideas can see the light of day. And it's not just the loud ideas that I heard. It's the best ideas, even for the quieter ones from the people in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one kind of question that I want to, it's like, it's been burning for me to ask for the last 15 minutes. If you're introverted, or as you'd like to say, a quieter person in an organization, and you're surrounded by people who are either wearing a mask or who are just loud by default, okay? And how do you continuously show up in an organization like that? We kind of covered off those pieces around, like, you know, making sure that you're blocking your time out and you're recharging your energies. But how do you the reward systems in organizations? How do introverted people or quieter people play that game so they can actually become more visible to leadership to get the rewards? And if there's any advice you can give to people who see an organization that rewards the loud people, how can you passively challenge that and ensure that they're being seen for their merits and what they're bringing to the table?
Well, two thoughts come to mind. The first thing, as a leader, so many of my relationships have been built one-on-one. And building those relationships, showing up authentically, telling people what you really think. One-on-one is pretty much the best way for you to do those things. Mm-hmm. I remember one of the leaders who was in a sales organization, and the stereotypical salesperson, very loud, speaks over people, oftentimes trying to sell you something. And in the beginning, when I first met this person, I kind of felt as if I had nothing in common with this person. It felt as if we were two completely different people. But a lot of our interactions up until that point was really in group meetings, in group settings. What I found was, as I started visiting and chatting this person one-on-one, you know, we could actually have a conversation. We can talk about the idea. We can talk about how our department design could actually help them do their jobs better, how they could help us. And I think over time, we built this kind of mutual respect one-on-one. We understood what we thought beforehand. Oftentimes, We might arrive in meetings together and actually be aligned on what we think is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you can find ways of doing this in a way that feels comfortable and authentic to you, not political conversations where other people might be looking and you might have to change what you want to say because of other people in the room. If you can have honest, authentic conversations one-on-one, you start building trust, you start earning brownie points, you start having a relationship with the people that you work with. Even if it's people that you might, in the beginning, think you have nothing in common with and couldn't see yourself working with them. I think if you can find those opportunities one-on-one to build those relationships and that trust, then you're going to have a much better working relationship going forward after that. I wish I wrote this down, but I forgot the second part of your question. So if you want to ask it again, I can answer it right now.
It was really like, if you look at the organizational reward systems, and I've seen it in toxic organizations firsthand, where they reward those people for, maybe subconsciously, for being louder and for being what they would perceive fitting the mold as a leader. How do you challenge passively those reward systems without looking like you're, kind of a spoke in the wheel, or like a stick in the wheel, should I say, like, and slowing things down and being just difficult?
I think the short answer is by showing people that there's a different way of succeeding. One of those ways, one of the things that I really struggled with at the time was being put on the spot and having to speak and presenting on behalf of my team some of the work that was happening.
Yeah.
The reason why this happened was because this was how things were done all the time.
That's right.
But who said this is the only way to do things?
Yeah.
So a lot of times people feel as if they had to ask for permission to change the way of working. But you don't. One thing that I did was to actually start recording my updates every 2 weeks. Whenever there was a new release, whenever there was a major update, I would sit down, I would record those things and would send it to the company update channel on Slack. They'll be able to see all of the work that what we've done, all the accomplishments that we've done. And they can do this in their own time. As a quieter person, I get to practice beforehand. I can actually nail everything that I want to say the way that I want to say it. And people on the receiving end of those team updates, for example, they can watch those videos in their own time, not during a meeting that you can schedule for the US, the UK, and Australia to be all online at the same time, which would be too early or too late for somebody on the call. If you can do these things, you can change these things to do things in a different way where you can be at your best. And for me, it was really about recording short videos of myself, for example, giving a team update. It's a way that I could show people a different way of actually doing things, but have the same, if not more, impact than the way things used to be.
Yeah, I love that. And you can use, I don't know what you were using for that, but Loom is a way that I've often done that. If you haven't seen loom.com, I think it's part of the Atlassian suite now, isn't it? Loom was purchased by. Well, that's another way you can do it. Tim, you are remarkable, and it's a great to see all the work that you're doing. And I know you're working on a number of other things at the moment. Like, people can go to thequietachiever.com with no E at the end of er. So you just Google Tim Yeo and you'll find thequietachiever.com. I'll put a link to that in the description if you're on YouTube, the show notes if you're anywhere else in Spotify and Apple and so forth. But generally speaking, the book is out, okay? And I'm going to put a link to that as well. Put a link to the website, because you've got a great community over there for people that want to learn more about the work that you're doing. But you're working on other things at the moment, so tell us what they are, and what other exciting things you might have going on at the moment as well.
So very intentionally, the year 2025, I wanted it to be the year of partnerships for me. I very intentionally went out there and looked for people to partner with. I've been working on the Quiet Achiever since 2021. I coach, I run courses online. But so far, I've been doing everything on my own, writing the book on my own. very intentionally this year, I wanted it to be a year of partnerships. And I can talk about two of them right now.
Yeah.
The first one is a partnership with Ryan Ramsey, and he runs the Chief Design Officer School. And the thing that we're partnering on is something called Convince Your Boss. We are focusing on the problem in work environments where the best ideas don't always win. Because sometimes it's the person who actually tells the best story, even if the story is not based on fact. Or maybe sometimes it's the person that the most politically savvy that gets their ideas to win. Or maybe sometimes it's your boss simply telling you, just go build this feature, right? And just do it, even though you have good evidence to actually make something else. So we know, even from speaking to senior individual contributors around the world, that the best ideas don't always win. They spend up to 60 to 80% of their times in meetings, talking about their work, trying to convince their stakeholders, and really only 20 to 40% of their time doing the thing that they were really hired to do. So clearly, we think there's something broken in the system. We've seen it ourselves, Ryan and I, in our time working. So Convince Your Boss is really about how to build good convincing arguments, knowing when to argue, knowing where to argue, and also giving you some of these templates and ways of thinking about building arguments to help your best idea actually win more often. So that's something that's coming up in May 2025.
Not too far.
And the second partnership is with Dr. Larry Cornett, who's a career coach with Invisible Career. And the thing we're working on together is something called Too Valuable to Lose. How to make yourself so valuable that your boss cannot afford to lose you. It's something that is at the intersection of getting hired through interviews, getting promoted in your current role, and also staying off the layoff list. We find that at the intersection where these three things happen, the preparation and the things that you need to do are largely the same, with a few tweaks for each of them. So we're going to put everything that we know from our experience into this one program, Too Valuable to Lose. And It's also coming out in May 2025. And probably the last thing that I'll talk about will be the book. If you want to find me, the best way to find me will be to look for The Quiet Achiever, Tim Yeo. I should be probably the first result on your search engine.
Yeah. Do you have a newsletter? I'm just looking on your website for people to learn and stay up to date. What's the best way for them to do that? Is it LinkedIn or your newsletter maybe?
Well, two ways. You can sign up for a newsletter at the bottom of my website, thequietachiever.com. Just Google for Tim Yeo, The Quiet Achiever. Second thing you can do is find me on LinkedIn. You can follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. And we can chat there.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I'll put links to those as well into the show notes. I always wrap up my podcast by thanking people for their time, energy, and their vulnerability. Because, as you said, really, coming on the show, let me go left and right and up and down is, putting you on the spot an awful lot of time. And I know it's not easy for a lot of people, but I really enjoyed and I learned an awful lot from speaking with you. So it's been an absolutely cracking way to start my day off. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. I really, really appreciate it.
No, Gerry, thank you so much for this opportunity. And for the people that are listening in, if I can leave you one final message, it is who you are is enough. You don't have to pretend to be somebody else. Pretending will only tire you. If you can accept that who you are is okay, then everything else is just skills. It's not part of your identity. It's not who you are. Being able to do public speaking well, being a leader, all these things are skills. And skills can be practiced. So if I can leave you anything, just recognize that who you are is enough. All these things that you're trying to do, they're not parts of your personality. They are skills, and skills can be practiced.
I love it. Tim, have a great one.
Thank you so much, Gerry. Speak soon.